God is good, and with each day that passes brings us a day closer to the launch of Pantheon Rise of the Fallen. This is Nathan NAPALM channel, and if you've not subscribed and you're interested in Pantheon Rise of the Fallen content or MMORPGs, especially the old school ones, then please consider doing so, because that's what we do here at the Nathan NAPALM channel. Now let's get right to it. In this particular video, I actually wanted to talk about emotions, and I'm kind of an emotionless creature, I am told by my wife. However, we can break down 6 basic emotions and how they affect us in MMORPGs, especially a really cool MMO such as Pantheon Rise of the Fallen. So let's see what we got. First, I want to start with one that we kind of should all be familiar with, and that would be loathing. Okay, loathing is basically how we feel right now, basically playing a lot of the new MMORPGs with all the content being at the end of the game and us just racing to get there and just doing kind of monotonous tasks in order to level up and get to that point where we can do something fun and challenging at the end game. Now, we all know Pantheon Rise of the Fallen is not that kind of game. However, that's what we're dealing with right now. So loathing leads to disgust, and disgust leads to boredom, and boredom leads to quitting the game and not playing anymore, canceling your sub, etc. That is the one emotion that I'm going to leave out of this talk, except for what I just said, because I do not believe this is going to be the effect we're going to have with Pantheon Rise of the Fallen. So let's move forward. What about Ecstasy, right? The game launches, we got Pantheon Rise of the Fallen, we got plenty of things to do, we're leveling up our characters together, we're grouping, we're socializing, we're having a really good time, and guess what? That leads to joy, which leads to serenity. And that's where we want to get to with our MMORPG, is that level of serenity, where we're just having a good time, where that's all we want to do. Where even when you're off at your day job, or you're running errands, getting groceries, etc., all you want to do is log back into that game and get back into that serenity zone, right? And socialize and level up and explore and all of that. So that is the #1 emotion, I would say, for Pantheon Rise of the Fallen, and really any of those old school immersive MMORPGs. What about admiration? Let's move on to admiration. So admiration in Pantheon Rise of the Fallen would be, there's lots of examples, but the one that pings in my mind, like perception system, would be that you see that guy, that high level, right? And he walks up and he's got the beautiful, rare, freaking exotic armor on. It looks all sweet. You're checking out the stats and you're like, oh my gosh, this guy's max level already. He's got all this cool gear. How did he get it so quick? This guy must have not slept. All this kind of thing. And admiration, should you approach this guy and start talking to him, which I've done in MMOs, and they've ended up 99% of the time in the old school MMOs being really nice people talking to me, and then they end up helping me get to a point where they're at, right? So admiration, especially when engaged socially, does lead to trust and then to acceptance. And when I say acceptance, I mean them accepting you and you accepting them, right? So that acceptance is another huge part of an MMO social environment. So we have serenity, which we all want to get there. We have acceptance, which is, once again, there's many ways we can get to acceptance, okay? That can just be by being driven personally, self-driven to go out and get the good stuff and level up and grind away and all this kind of thing and be good at our class, right? So that we're accepted in the community as being that go-to bard, right? Like, this is the bard. This guy's a really good bard. He's accepted, right? This is the guy we want to bring. We need a bard. This is the bard right here. This guy, acceptance. Beautiful thing. Alright, now, it gets more complicated with emotions than that. So if you mix serenity and acceptance, right, what do you end up with? Well, serenity and acceptance, my friends, leads to love. And then we got some marriages happening in the game, you know what I'm saying? So serenity and acceptance, I mean, think about it, makes perfect sense. I don't need to dive too deep into that because I want to move on, but I'm going to touch on that as you mix these, what ends up happening, because it's beautiful. Alright, now next up, what do we have? Terror, my favorite emotion and when I'm playing an MMO or any kind of game, really, I like that feeling of terror, right? Like, it's not going so good. You're real deep in this dungeon. You're really, really, really far from the zone, right? You're too far. You can't make it, right? There's too many mobs. They're on you. They're all over the place. The tanks are trying to keep up. They're trying to kill them. off of the squishies and the DPS and the healer, and the healer's going crazy, or the two healers, whatever the case may be, and they're barely keeping up. Terror. We're in big trouble now, right? What does terror lead to? Of course, fear. And what does fear lead to? Apprehension. Okay, so the interesting thing about apprehension in an MMO is you are more careful, right? You're more careful. You're kind of a little freaked out because you know the penalties, right? The penalties are real deep. They're bad, right? You're gonna lose XP. You might even lose some gear. I don't know. We haven't heard the full details on that yet, but there will be a penalty, okay? It'll be harsh. It won't feel fair, right? It'll make you more apprehensive. It'll make you more careful. It'll make you go into things being more prepared and not taking as many risks. But when you do take those risks, you get a big reward, right? But you're apprehensive. You're not sure you want to do that. You're not sure if it's worth it, that kind of thing. So beautiful. Now what happens though when we mix acceptance with apprehension, right? When you're accepted but you're apprehensive, that leads to submission, right? So, and that plays out in MMOs because if you're accepted into a group, but you're apprehensive, you're not so sure of yourself, right? You don't have a lot of confidence in the class you're playing, or the area you're going to, or your gear, or whatever it is. Maybe you just don't feel like you're high enough level or have the experience. When you get into a group and they accept you as being, oh, this is a good bard, it's a good bard, let's take them down to this place. You're like, oh my gosh, I don't know if I can do this. Like, you know, I don't know if I'm that good, right? That leads to submission, where you're just willing to accept whatever, you know, anybody throws some advice. You're like, sure, I'll try that, you know, submission. So that's interesting. Let's move forward though. Amazement. All right, I love this one. So amazement, you know, the beautiful graphics. Once the game enters its next phase, and we're starting to see the game more in a launchable state. How the amazement, you know, all the systems in the game, the perception system and the acclamation system, all that, you're just amazed by everything going on, and how beautiful it is, and how it's all working together, and how everything's leading back to this really beautiful social environment like we've never seen before, right? So you're amazed by everything, and amazement leads to surprise, but surprise does lead to distraction, okay? So you're distracted. The game is distracting you, okay, non-stop, and we all know how that feels. You're constantly from one thing to another, and then you get sidetracked, and then there's this perception pings, and then you're up on that, and etc., etc. Now, what happens, though, when we take distraction and we mix it with the previous emotion, apprehension? Oh, then we get awe. You know, being in awe of the situation, right? Of the game, of everything going on, of the community, of the world. Everything puts you in awe, and that's a beautiful thing, and that's something. So far we have 3 things that can happen in a game when you start mixing these emotions. We have love, we have submission, we have awe, and I think we've all at least experienced those in some capacity. If we played MMORPGs, especially the old school ones, very social MMORPGs, I think we can all kind of agree so far. So let's move forward. What do we have next? Grief, right? Grief in MMORPGs can come from several factors. Sometimes you might get grief because you didn't get that drop that you really wanted. You knew you were going to get it today. It finally dropped, and it's your lucky day. You rolled for it, you didn't get it. Somebody else in the group got it, right? Grief. What about grief because of the punishments, the terror, the fear, right? And it didn't go so well, and now you've died, and now you've lost all this progress you've made. You lose all this XP, you go into grief. Grief leads to sadness, and sadness leads to pensiveness. So deep and serious thought, right? This puts you into a deep and serious thought. So you've experienced something terrible, some grief. Maybe somebody griefed you, right? Whatever the case may be. Maybe somebody purposely is training you, or whatever the situation may be. But it leads you to this deep and serious kind of almost depressive kind of thought, right? Pensiveness. And now what happens though when you're been amazed, surprised, and distracted, you know, and you've got this grief, sadness, pensiveness? Well, that leads to disapproval. I mean, think about it. So you're distracted, and you're in this deep, serious, kind of sad thought thing. So what ends up happening is you begin disapproving. Now, this is actually what happens to a lot of people when they play MMORPGs, especially the really immersive ones, with a lot of social things happening. And it's something I want you to be aware of, and I want you to realize what's happening. So there's lots of emotions that can happen in MMO, but when you get stuck in these two, right? the amazement, the surprise, and the distraction. That's normal, okay? That's gonna happen to you. All it takes is when you're in that zone, and then you are getting griefed, right? Something terrible just keeps happening to you over and over and over, just jabbing at you, and you end up in this deep, depressive kind of thought about, you know, I'm never gonna get this, I'm never gonna make it to that, I'm never gonna be that good, etc., etc. That leads to disapproval. Well, disapproval of the game, right? You begin to think like, well, this just isn't for me, right? I can't get it, there's too much going on, and this bad thing keeps happening to me. So be aware of that, be careful of that. I don't like it when people fall into that trap. They end up quitting a wonderful game just because they kind of got stuck in that kind of cycle. But I think you get the point on that one. So let's continue moving forward on what we got next. So next up, we would have, well, we skipped to Loathing first, because I want to cover it first, because I don't feel like that's going to happen a lot in a very immersive game. So that would be the next one, which Loathing, just to touch on real quick, was you loathe it, you disgust it, and then or you're disgusted by it, and then it leads to boredom. So real quick, what happens though when you're bored of something, and you've got this, what we just talked about, the pensiveness, the grief, the sadness, the pensiveness, well, in those situations becomes remorse, right? You become remorseful, you regret, you're beginning to feel regret, you're bored, you're in deep serious thought in a negative way, and it leads to being remorseful. Alright, but let's move on to the next one. So the next one, this happens to everybody. You ready? Rage, okay? Not good. Something bad happens, you're mad. And by the way, we're obviously in the negative spectrums here, but don't worry, there's good can come out of even these negative things. So rage, you know, I don't even need to get into detail. We play video games, we know about rage, alright? And rage, as we know, leads straight to anger, and anger leads to annoyance, being annoyed. Now you're mad, you've done this corpse run 3 freaking times, you know, you're mad, you went into rage mode, you're angry, and you're annoyed. Now what happens though when you mix annoyance with boredom, you know, the loathing, disgust, boredom, well then you get contempt, and that's a dangerous game too, right? So you get this contempt because you're bored and you're annoyed. Obviously it's going to lead to contempt. Alright, now we're almost done. Next would be vigilance, okay? Being vigilant, which leads to anticipation, which leads to interest, right? And when you get this, when you're vigilant, you got a cause, you're going after it, you're gonna get it, you're nailing it in, and you're anticipating the reward that's to come, and you're interested in everything happening. Here's where it can become a problem. When you mix vigilance with the rage spectrum, you get aggressiveness. Now, we've all encountered that guy. I thankfully don't get aggressive, alright? I'll just leave, right? If I get to the point, and it happens to everybody, where you got this goal, and you're all about it, and everybody's on board, and you've got this perfect plan, you go out, and it's just negative, 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 and nothing's working out. You're doing everything right. Maybe somebody's not doing something right, but you feel like you are. You're on your game, and you want it, and you're after it. And if this was supposed to be the day, it's not happening. You go into rage, anger, and you're annoyed, and then that leads to aggressiveness, right? So when you mix those two, you get that aggressive guy who's just taking it out on the group, taking it out on the guild, whatever the case may be. And I think we're all very familiar with that, definitely in an MMORPG. But here's the thing, with the vigilance, anticipation, interest, now we're back to the first real emotion that I really like, which was ecstasy, joy, and serenity. So what happens when you're vigilant? You are anticipating the reward or the action going to happen, plus you know, then that leads to interest, and you've got the ecstasy, joy, and you've reached that serenity level of playing the game. Well, that is where optimism comes from. So the interesting thing about this chart, and I'll put this in the video here so you can kind of look at it. I didn't invent this, by the way. This was invented way back in the 20th century by a guy who was just basically breaking down the what he calls the 6 basic emotions. There are tons of different diagrams and emotional type derivative things out there that you can check out. This one I really like though, because I felt like these are the basic emotions of playing a video game or playing an MMORPG. So I kind of want to share it with you guys because you can learn a lot from this, right? You can kind of break down how you're feeling, right? And understand how it led to that. with this chart, or at least that's how I feel. So, you know, you can use this for various different things, not just MMORPGs. Obviously, you know, made in the 1980s or so, was not designed for an MMO. I'm just saying it works very well for that, because a good game is going to lead to all these emotions. Let's just face it, even the negative ones, okay? Because you're invested in the game, so it's going to lead to some of this. And also, guys, for the guys out there, maybe this will help you next time you get in a fight with your wife. You can be like, well, look, here's why you're aggressive right now, right? You were vigilant, you wanted to get the bills paid, I spent all the money, you went to rage, anger and annoyance, and now you're aggressive, so that's what's happening. Don't try that. That's not going to work so well for you. But anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you learned something from it. I thought it was very interesting. I wanted to share it with you guys, and I thought you guys would enjoy that, and I hope you do. And guys, like I said before, if you're interested in Pantheon Rise of this was kind of a weird video, I admit it, but you know, it's necessary that we talk about stuff like this, right? But if you're interested in Pantheon Rise of check out my channel. I got tons of content, and if you're not already subscribed, please consider doing so. And as usual, guys, thank you for joining me. I really appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed the video. And until next time, God bless and happy gaming.